Everyone, it's Nicole. I'm here today with Jillibean Soup sharing a process video on how I created this fun spring page. So I started off by cutting a mandala shape from the Jillibean Soup silhouette shapes and added a ring around it in my silhouette software. So I've just set that at the side, and now what I'm doing is taking some gesso and I'm just applying that to the back of my pattern paper, and that's just creating like a bit of a whitewashed effect over top of the pattern paper. You can really still see the design behind it, but I just wanted that kind of washed effect over the top just to create almost like a vellum like a feel to it, just to add a little bit of transparenciness over top. So I'm going to set that aside to dry, and I'm just going to clean up my area here. And you can see that I have a bunch of felt flowers, and I have those two mandala kind of doily shapes inside of a circle that I'm going to work with. What I want to do to start is fill in some of those open areas inside just one of those die cut shapes. So two ways to do this. The first is just to add a little bit of liquid glue to the back of your design where you want to have your paper, and then stick that down onto a scrap of pattern paper. The second is to use those negative pieces left over from when you cut your design on your digital cutter and just use that as a tracing template. So you can see I just take the pattern paper here and I lie the design over top, and I just keep going with multiple shapes over top of different colors of pattern paper over and over again until I have as many as I think I want to fill my design. Now I'm not actually going to fill the whole piece in, so I'm just going to do this a few more times using that same scrap of paper. And it's a really great way. As you can see, I'm using pieces that I've have scraps of, so things that I've already die cut before or punched, little tiny bits of paper. Those are great to keep for something like this that you want to fill in a die cut design, because you're not really going to waste cutting into a whole big sheet of paper. So when you do something like this, you just want to leave a little edge around that design. So I have my white cardstock there, and I'm just putting that over top, and I'm leaving probably like an eighth of an inch all the way around the edge, just so I can have something to stick to the back of that cardstock on the die cut shape that I have there. So again, there's no right or wrong. You just keep doing this until you have all your shapes ready to go to fill in your background. And I use wet glue to put this in place. It's usually pretty easy that way. You can also use a dot runner to adhere these little pieces into the back of your design. If you decide to go the wet glue route and stick this down onto your scrap of paper, you do need to let it dry before you trim off. This one here has already dried, so I'm just going to trim that one away. But it is a lot easier, I find, just using that extra piece as a template and cutting them out. So I'm just kind of place these here where I think I'm going to want to stick them down, and then I'm just going to go ahead, add a little bit of liquid glue onto the back, and then flip these upside down so I have the reverse side showing up. So you can see I'm just going to go around and fill some of these pieces in. I'm going to leave some open because I really want the background to pop through a little bit, and I'm going to fill in a little bit of an area across the whole background just so that I'm putting foam adhesive here and it gives me something to pop over top of my design. So I added some foam adhesive around the edge there too, of that little circular ring, and so that's going to keep my two layers of that cardstock. I'm going to call it a bit of a dream catcher, but it's going to create a bit of visual interest with the foam adhesive. So the trick is just peeling off all the backing and then getting your design layered together. So now my background is pretty dry. It doesn't take long with that gesso to dry quickly. As long as you have a thin layer on there, you should be fairly quick. And now I'm just going to add this large Dreamcatcher mandala into one corner of the layout. I'm also going to add my photo, as you can see, with a whole bunch of foam adhesive. I like using just foam craft sheets when I'm adding something large behind my photo, just to get it to pop. It's a lot cheaper than using all that sticky foam adhesive. You just need to add some glue in between the layers to get it to stand nice and firm. So now I have some of the Jillibean Soup felt flowers. You can see I have some larger ones here and I have some smaller ones. I've just taken them apart. I'll put a link here in the video where you can find out a tutorial I did previously for Jillibean Soup that shows you how you can take one felt flower and turn it into 2 or 3 little mini ones. So I've done that with some of the pink and the navy and the green flowers, but I've left that gray and the purple lavender color all the usual size just to get a little bit of interest. And I'm kind of figuring out where I want to place those on my design. I also know I want to use these really fun foam stickers that go with the Rainbow Root collection. So I'm just kind of pulling those things out and trying to decide where I want to go on my project from here. When I started this project, I actually had an inspiration piece from Pinterest that I found, and it's a picture of a dream catcher. And so that was kind of the idea that I would use the flowers from the Jillibean soup, mix the media, as well as some strips of paper from Spoonful of Soul, which is the paper collection I'm using. So that's kind of where the inspiration for how to start this page began. And now I'm just cutting some strips of paper from Spoonful of Soul. And you can see I'm just kind of adding those to the bottom, like the bottom of a dream catcher. So there's no precise measurements for those strips. I just cut varying thicknesses between 1/2 inch and 3/4, and I'm just going to line them up on the bottom. And then I ran them really quickly through my sewing machine. Did a little bit of straight stitch and a zigzag on some of them, and I'm just trimming them down along the edge here. And then I'll trim off the end pieces and then use those smaller pieces to layer over top a little bit, so you kind of get that layered look with the overhang like on a dream catcher. So I'm just going to trim these down a little bit. Again, there's no right or wrong. I'm just kind of making those hangy bits along the bottom edge. Okay, so now I want to finish off with my flowers again. I've decided now I want to have the flowers along the top edge of that dream catcher instead of in the bottom corner. So I'm going to start with my larger flowers. And with embellishments, I like to start with the larger ones and work my way down to the small. So I'll start with the larger flowers and stick those in place. For any of these little ones here that I've made smaller, you'll need to use either hot glue or some glue dots to get those in place. So I'm just adding a 3D craft dot there to the back of some of them and sticking them in place in around each other. I'm trying to mix up the colors around my little grouping that I have going on, tucking in some of that greenery in and around the different colors of the blue, the pink, the purple, and the gray. And I'm also varying the sizes, so I'm making sure I don't have a lot of small ones together. I'm trying to mix in different sizes and shapes of the flowers. You just tuck those in, and like I said, anything you need, you can use a glue dot for. If you can't get them to stick to the back of them, sometimes it's a little bit tricky, just stick your glue dot onto your paper and then push the felt flower on top of it and it will hold it in place nicely. So I'm going to add a couple more flowers here, I think. I just really want that top bundle of flowers to look really full. And then I decided I wanted to add another dimension to the flower piece. So I've cut some flowers out of this patterned paper here. So I'm going to fussy cut this one here really quickly. And I'm going to add that to my grouping just to kind of stretch it out. Right now it's feeling a little bit tight together. So by cutting the flowers and fussy cutting them out, you can add some, like, I'm going to call them droopy flowers, but it creates more like flower clusters. So as you can see here above my photo and to the left of my photo, you can see some other flowers I fussy cut. And I'm just tucking them in and around to kind of extend my floral grouping a little bit and add just a little bit of different texture and dimension too. You can get a lot of pretty floral cuts out of that pattern paper, and I'm just overhanging things onto my photo to kind of have everything blend a little better. So now I'm going to take the foam sticker from the Rainbow Root collection, and I'm just going to line it up on my ruler. Just want to make sure I can get the spacing correctly. I want it to line up to the end of my photo area there. So I find this is the best way to kind of place it where I want it on the page. And so I'm going to line down my one letter, excuse me. But as you can see, it's because the ruler is a little bit thicker, it's harder for me to get the letters off. So I'm just going to go place them one by one because I had started with that E in the right area where I wanted it. It's really easy to do. And I'm going to add a couple of these foam little plus signs in around just to add a little bit more pieces of black in around my layout. Really some fun foam stickers. And of course a little heart beside my title. Okay, so now I want to add these alpha beans along the bottom edge of my photo. That kind of just fills in that grass area on the photo and draws a little more of that yellow color onto the page, just to add another layer of color. And then I think I'm going to add in a few stickers. These are from the Spoonful of Soul coordinating sticker sheet. So I'm going to add a little bit of a sentiment there above my photo, a little label in beside where the two layers of photos join. And here are some close-ups now of the layout. You can see that floral cluster, super pretty and fun, and filling in that pattern paper is really easy. It's a nice way to add a little bit of color into your layout, but not overly super bold. And that die cut you can make yourself in just minutes. You can see I have a nice layered effect between the two things there, and I have my own little dream catcher. So I hope you enjoyed this process video. We'll see you again on the Jillibean blog.